Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends. One of my friends is missing, but she should be back any moment. She had an unusual noise with her computer and she was trying to figure out what it is. And here she is. We now have Jeannie here. And we have the whole crew. I'm all excited now. Good morning, Jeannie. Good morning, Mr. Billy. Good morning, Kurt. And the noise is back. So I'm going to mute you. Actually, everyone should mute themselves. We should only have one person. It may not have been you, Jeannie. Maybe it was. I don't know. Anyway,
I had to change computers because it's not starting up right, so something's going on.
Okay, now your dog is talking, but that's okay. I'm used to a dog talking. Anyway, I have Jeannie Alford with me. I have Pastor Billy, who you guys know, and also Kurt Kruger, who should have his Facebook name on more than his business name, but that's okay because I didn't tell him that. I'm just realizing it. It's just in case people wanted to contact you, if you have your real name instead, they can find you easier. But you are on the top of the stream, so it doesn't really matter. In any case, we are here to talk about vulnerability. And we noticed, or Jeannie and I noticed last week at the end of the second session, people were asking why, how do you say no to someone? And saying no is actually being very vulnerable because you don't know how that person's going to react. And you think, oh, I better say yes. And if I don't say yes, they're going to get mad at me. And I don't want anyone mad at me. I know I have gone through those thoughts. But I am learning to say no. No, it's not an easy thing to do. Being authentic is sometimes not very easy because it means saying no when you need to say no. It means being honest. In my mind, it means being honest instead of expecting someone to go the way you want them to go or go the way they want you to go. You don't need to agree. And I'd like to throw this over to Jeannie, and then we'll move to Kurt and around. Maybe not. Okay.
I think one of the things that I'll say I, because it's hard for me to talk for other people. Well, actually, it's easy for me to talk for other people. It's just that I'm making up fiction at the time because I don't know what's in other people's minds. So I find that being vulnerable is very frightening. Letting people know who you really are and being authentic puts you out there in such a way that you could get hurt. You could, as we say, and I understand from my international friends that I speak very illustratively because in America we always have examples, but sticking your foot into a pothole is something that it feels like when you're trying to be authentic and to allow yourself to be vulnerable. I find that if I'm feeling vulnerable, I tend to move towards people pleasing because there's a little child inside of all of us, and the little child inside of me wants people to love me. So I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say I can do it. Or as one of my bosses told me, always say yes, we'll figure it out later. So the ability to say no is something that actually gets taught out of us, if you will. We're not we're 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 taught and socialized to be pleasant, to be agreeable, to always say yes. And then we find out as adults, well, I was an adult when I figured this out. You need to have something called boundaries, where you can put yourself into a space and be kind of protected, and that it's okay to say no, but to say no with that authenticity. So I learned to say things like, I'd really love to do this for you, but I have like 4 tasks ahead of you that everybody tells me needs to be done yesterday. Which one do you think I can let slide? And that allows folks to at least understand that there's more to my life than just them, but that my priorities are set differently than theirs. And then we could figure out if I can help them, how to do it in such a way that it's not overwhelming. And when I say overwhelming, it's overwhelming for me, because once I get overwhelmed, then I feel like all things stop. I have to breathe, I have to take a break, I have to figure out, and then I have to make those hard decisions. So I like to bring folks in to that decision process so they understand, yes, I can write that document for you, but my boss put 3 things that need to be done yesterday. So which one do you think takes priority? Your thing or this thing? Because I can do yours on Thursday. Will that work? So it's always a negotiation. And I've learned over time to, well, I guess what I learned was co-creation, allowing other people in so that it's not me taking a stand and putting myself out there to be vulnerable, but me being real and saying, here's my plate. Which part do you want to be on? Does that make sense?
I love it. That makes so much sense. And it gives that input the opportunity for others to be able to join in the conversation, or that actually it's more of a dialogue. And it allows people to get into deep thinking, deep listening. For me, my background started out in regard to psychology and sports psychology. So vulnerability looked a lot different for athletes, because look at the Olympics is happening. You're super vulnerable. Like you saw what happened with, well, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a young lady that is the best gymnast in the world. She has 4 routines named after her. And that's very, 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 very unusual. Nobody's ever had 4, and so on and so forth. So she actually had some mistakes in the prelims because she feels so much pressure. She is super vulnerable now because of her allowing the quote pressure to get to her. And most of the people at the Olympic level have a sports psychologist to deal with that. Well, when you look at everything as a must do, then you can be very stoic about it, or you can be very and stoic also means flexible, not just hard nosed kind of thing that most people think about stoicism. But there's ways to work about it, and to be able to get into that calm state of mind where the peak performance occurs. And this is the real practice that meditation allows you to be able to get into at will when you practice it enough. Like I was on the hijacked airplane. I got into that state of mind because I'd been practicing an hour a day for at least 3 years. And God willing, I had also an incredible teacher, Swami Muktananda, who gave me that ability to be able to get into that space. How many people get trained that? Like you mentioned, Jeannie, about in school, we are in a school system that is factory oriented toward the left brain. And it's all memorize this, satisfy the teacher. Yes, thank you. I feel good because you agreed that I got the grade, and so on and so forth. And in Asia, it's the same thing. You've got to go on to another standard. You have to pass those tests. When we get a system of education that is hearty, it opens up the right brain and connects us with that intuition. Intuition is the most valuable thing to create harmony in the world, because we intuit that nature can guide us and we can flow with nature, or we can try to fight it like we do with dams, which ruin the environment, or killing off the predators in an area. The predators are there for a reason. And when you kill off too many of them, it destroyed Yellowstone National Park, one of the most beautiful national parks in the world. So we've got to make sense of our whole being. And like, I'm very vulnerable because I didn't prep anything. I know about vulnerability. Why? Because I'm being vulnerable. I'm expressing what it is that allows me to flow with that heart and to be able to communicate so that we're clear. And if there's an unclarity, immediately, I just may say, ouch. And it stops people immediately. They start, what happened? And I have a chance to regroup. I said, well, for some reason, I don't feel so calm or peaceful. And they'll say, well, can you tell me why? And again, it's drawing in the other person to be on your team, to be part of our life, because we are at one. The Native Americans say all our relations. All life is our relation. Without the trees, how do we survive? Without the microbiome, how do the trees survive? Without the insects, how do the birds survive? And so on. It's all intertwined. And so many of us get caught up in tunnel vision instead of, that's why my company's called Success Systems International. It's systems. Your body has a whole bunch of systems, and it all has to work together. It gets to work together. When it has to, it's a struggle. And then you might get one of these dis-eases. So we get to be easy and flow with everything. So I'd like to flow on to Dr. William, our minister here.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. And how great to be with you. I'm sitting in my car, and so I'm being vulnerable sitting in my car. Okay. And, but I love vulnerability. Carla, Kurt, and Jeannie love vulnerability, because when you're vulnerable, you're weak. Now, we haven't used that word yet, but hey, when we're vulnerable, we're weak, because the perception is, when you are, from other people, when you are vulnerable, that there's like a sense of weakness in your being and who you are. So I love being vulnerable because it causes me to be weak. And when I'm weak, I have to reach out to God for strength. And I've actually developed something related to vulnerability. And I love acronyms, because as a pastor, when I'm talking on, whenever I'm giving a address, and people need hooks to think about and to remember things that they can take away after they go home or they go to work. And my vulnerability hook is to be, when you're vulnerable, that means you're real, you're authentic, and you're genuine. So what's the acronym? It's RAG, RAG. So I want to be a rag. A rag is something you use to clean up messes. And when you engage in the lives of people who are broken, who are hurting, who are vulnerable, probably in a bad way, who are disenfranchised, who are marginalized, I want to be a rag to them. I want to love them. I want to care for them. I want to put appropriately my arms around them, just like, God, Jesus does for me. And so I want to be a rag for them. And a rag cleans up messes. And we don't think too much about rags, do we? We put them over the back of a chair, or we have them in a place that's really kind of alone, not mixed with other nice looking things, because most rags are not nice looking. And so I love vulnerability. I'll go back to that. Makes me feel weak. And then I can actually, when I'm weak, I can engage other people's spaces. And these are hurting people. These are persecuted people. These are downtrodden people. These are broken people. These are widows and orphans, or people that have gone through traumatic things, like whatever you think of as traumatic, whether it's individualized trauma or community-wide trauma. And so that allows me with them to be real, to be authentic, and to be genuine, and to love them, to care for them. And finally, I'll say, and turn it back to you, Carla, when we are vulnerable, I think people really appreciate that. That's been true in my practice, that when I'm vulnerable, people then feel like you are the vulnerable person. You're revealing your true self. And then, like a flower, those people open up, and they're more willing to talk with you, or maybe no conversation, and you're just sitting with them, holding their hand appropriately. And maybe there's been a death or traumatic situation, and you're just there being vulnerable, and you don't have to say anything. You can just be with them. You can have the ministry of presence, PRESENCE. So I love vulnerability. I try to practice it each and every day with people that I minister to in the name of Jesus. So those are my thoughts. Carla, back to you.
Kurt, you can put all of those things in the chat. Oh, you did? Okay. When vulnerability is something that I think I do every day, especially when I do these shows, because I have no idea if 100 people will be watching, or even if no one will be watching. But I do it anyway because I feel that it is a chance to bring your consciousness or your awareness that we are not disconnected. We're all connected in every sense to the world. If you have a dog or a cat in your house, you may speak to them and not think they're listening, but they are, and they hear us, and they act according to what we need them to act like. The plants in our house, the trees are here to give us shade. And we're vulnerable to what is going on in the world, or even on the planet. And I think we forget that very, very often. And we need to begin to realize that this is our reality. And if we can be authentic in who we are, then that vulnerability brings us together more than separates us. When we think that we're different from someone else because they're not, I'm Jewish and that person isn't Jewish, they're never going to understand me. Or I weigh too much and that skinny person will never talk to me because I don't look good. Everything we do, if we do it authentically, we're being ourselves. And we are vulnerable to anything that comes up to us. And maybe we really need to have a good dictionary definition of what vulnerability is, of what all this is about. Because this is life. And when we think that we're separate from anyone, we're actually creating something that really doesn't exist in the world, at least in my mind. And thank you, Kayima, for that nice comment. Who would like to comment on what I just said? Great, Kurt.
I'd love to, because this idea that we associate, like William mentioned, is that we associate vulnerability with susceptibilities, with you're susceptible to pain. We're going to open up to some sort of pain, whether it's psychological or physical. It's going to give me some pain. And I don't believe, I actually believe the opposite in regard to being vulnerable. I think it strengthens a person. And when we get our association with life in proper perspective and not use the old paradigm and the ideas of the old paradigm, this top-down structure, this and so on, and we really understand that oneness of life, and we understand that we're all human beings instead of this, that, or the other kind of human being, we will be able to flow with nature more and be able to be, it'll be easier to be what we call authentic. And yet, why shouldn't we be authentic? The only reason is because of our, again, the top-down structure. It's like when you read a book on parenting called Nurturing with Love and Wisdom, Disciplining with Peace and Respect, and it's also subtitled Mindful Parenting. The first two values that it has is love, which brings peace. So when you love God above all else and you see God in each other and you know that God dwells within you as you respect the difference that you are. I'm an identical twin, and yet I'm so different than my twin brother. I have my choices because God gave us free choice. He gives us the choice to look on the bright side of life or on the hellish side of life. We can focus on what we want, or we can focus on what we don't want. And we get exactly what we focus on. So let's focus on the positive, on the present, and what it is that we can do now to be able to have the solutions happen for the future, because what happens now brings the future on. The good thoughts bring the future actions on, and so on. So that's my little 2 cents. And Jeannie, you have an idea?
Jeannie.
I have lots of ideas, and I'm trying to self-edit. We are tied, so much so that there's an energy that we don't pay a lot of attention to that actually physically ties us all together. And I like to use a visualization of roots going, you bring energy through your whole body and you visualize it kind of cleaning out your soul, if you will, taking what you don't need and just pouring it into the earth so that that energy can be used differently. And then I also have a vision. I also follow that with energy coming up from the earth and coming through to help nourish you. And so it becomes a cycle of energy, cosmic energy, earth energy, and we're all tied to that energy. If you ever walked into a room and felt like something was wrong, somebody was hurt, somebody's upset, you can feel it before you walk into the room. I used to do that when I was a child, and I didn't understand it, but I remember saying, no, 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 trying to go, my mother was pulling me and I'm like, no, no, no. Well, there was an argument going on between other family members, and I just didn't want to be around it. Fast forward, now I can walk into a room and I can see when people are elated, and you can feel happy and light and ready to jump in, and you can feel when there's tension. And we can change how that reflects in the world by working on ourselves. So, for example, in my work life, my former work life, let's say, when I was working in corporate communications, if there was a crisis, and believe me, everybody thinks that their crises are the end of the world, and I had a saying that I wouldn't say out loud because it's disturbing, but I would say, we're not killing babies. This isn't that kind of crisis. And that would settle me down, and I'd say, okay, now tell me what's going on. Because I actually worked in an industry where there was a chemical spill and people were being adversely affected. So that was a real crisis. You know, that was something that was life or death kind of crisis. But, if a reporter, misspoke and put out information that shouldn't be out yet, that's really not a crisis. You can fix it. So I would settle people down so that we could look at the reality of the issue. In one case, the the CEO was like, we got to do a recall, we got to do all this stuff, and I was like, wait a second. And when everybody told me everything, I was like, so you're telling me 3 of your widgets out of 40,000 are causing a problem, and they're 10 years old, and this all falls within the acceptable failure rate? Yes. And you're telling me you want to go and check all 40,000, replace those that are vulnerable to breaking down, and fix the designs with the cover so that this won't happen again? Yes. I go, that's not a crisis. That's a celebration. And repurposed their view of what the issue was. And we can do that every day. When we start to feel that there's something amiss, and that's what it is. It's something amiss, something you didn't expect. We have a tool. I'm going to talk about 2 tools. One tool we learned to do when we were children. We learned in the first nanosecond that we entered this world, and that's breathing. We actually learned to breathe, but it's pretty shallow. But if you take those deep breaths, which I'm sure Kurt can actually talk more into, but you take all the way down to your toes, that deep breath, and you slowly release it, that changes how you see the world, from the amygdala fight or flight to the frontal more logical. So you can reframe what the issue is and be more logical about it. So that's one thing to remember. There's a reason they used to call me the breathing lady everywhere I work, because my first thing would say, take a breath. The second one, I call my perception tool, my portable perception tool. That's it. I'm going to ask you what you see, and you're going to tell me, see the palm of your hand. And then I'm going to turn it around and go, and I see the back of my hand. Guess what? They're the same hand. In other words, we're speaking about the same thing from different perspectives. And when we start to respect perspective, that people have different ideas, that they're made up differently, then we have a much richer, more 3D kind of world. It's going to cause some issues, and that's where vulnerability comes in. I see, or I hear, I understand you're coming at this from a different perspective. Let's look at it from all angles. And that kind of ability allows us to be who we are and not negate the other person, because we have to respect them as much as we want them to respect us. And that's why oftentimes I say we can change the world one conversation at a time. Pastor Bill, how's that?
Yeah, I've got to jump off the call, the conversation, so forgive me. It's been great to be with you, and I just have a few parting words. And I I just love being part of MindPlore. So, Carla, thank you for your vision and just having the conversation today on vulnerability. I've got to meet with some government officials in New York. I'm going to Afghanistan next month to lecture there on gender-based violence and child marriage. But my parting comments about vulnerability, Jeannie, I love what you said about cleaning my soul. And Kurt, I actually do agree with you. And I should have finished my thought that vulnerability for me, I feel weak, but in my weakness, I'm actually gaining strength, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Uh, like our friend Nietzsche said, that which does not kill you only makes you stronger. And not that I agree with everything that our friend Nietzsche said, but I love the phrase cleaning my soul. And of course, being a pastor and a follower of Jesus, I need to do that every day, whether it's with my wife or my kids or with other people. And of course, I call that confession. And when you confess, like, we all make mistakes, that's why pencils have erasers. And so when I make a mistake and I need to go back to someone and say, hey, would you forgive me? That puts you probably in one of the most vulnerable spaces you can ever be. And so for me, if I've offended someone, either by commission or omission, either knowingly or unknowingly, then I have to be vulnerable and I have to go to them in a spirit and a willingness of confession. And that for me is total vulnerability. But Jeannie, as you also said, it's the cleaning and the cleansing of our souls. So cleaning of the soul is a good thing because our souls can get dirty during the course of a day, and we need to clean out the closet and get the junk out of the trunk. So God bless all. I gotta go. Thanks so much.
It's always good to see Reverend Billy. He's always got those good insights and inspirations. Uh, we're old timers and we talk about pencils and erasers, and the kids don't know about those. They only know about the delete button and so on. So it's beautiful to be with you guys. I loved what you said about, putting the hand up and both sides, because like you said, it's the same hand, but we just perceive it differently. And this is what life is. Life is a perception. And should we like to have a happier life, again, this simple thing of focusing on what we want. And one of the tools that I use when somebody's really stressed out, let's say somebody cuts you off on the road, which it all too often happens, especially for Reverend Billy in New York City. I know how they drive there. They're not as bad as in Bombay, but that's another story. You sometimes show their IQ. Sometimes people use different fingers, but and yell and scream something, and you're the one that's upset. They're just going along like this, or they're going there because their wife is giving birth. We don't know what's happening with them, but we do know what happens with us. So as soon as you catch yourself starting to go crazy, I always tell people to thump your thymus like you're Tarzan, really firmly right there. The thymus is, if you take your hand like this at the base of your throat, it's basically about 2 inches below your chest breastbone. You take your hand and right underneath let me see if I got it there. Okay. And it's 2 inches there. That's part of your endocrine system. It immediately stops the overproduction of adrenaline. Adrenaline is that fight or flight hormone. So we're not going to fight them. We're not going to chase them unless you're really crazy. And we get to be able to calm that down. Then, like you said, magic breath. First thing we ever got was that breath. Take a few deep breaths. I actually tell people to bless the person instead of curse them. no matter what it is that's happening in their life, who can't use blessing? There's a beautiful book by Pierre Pradervan. It's called The Gentle Art of Blessing. He's a Swiss author. And he once started this habit of, in Geneva, of walking the streets and seeing somebody, and he'd mentally say, blessings of light and love, or blessings of health and wealth, just mentally. And he started doing this more and more. And one day he saw a person sitting on the side of the road, maybe waiting for a bus. And he said this, and the guy jumped up and cold cocks him, knocks him out. He wakes up, who knows how long later. He stands up, figures he's going to go home and see a big shiner on his cheek. Nothing, because even when he got up, he blessed the guy again. Even though it wasn't there, he did this gentle art of blessing. But there was no shiner when he got home. Why? It's the magic of peace. It's the magic of love. It's the magic of intention. It's the magic of what we say to ourselves and how we treat life. When we treat life with love and peace, we get back love and peace. It's amazing. We're so blessed to be around at this time, especially. Carla was saying she's so stressed out because of so many things about this particular conference that she's heading and organizing and so on. And she didn't think it was going to be so hard. And it's totally understandable. Stuff starts flying. I've got about 10 things happening in my life today that wasn't there. 3 of them weren't there yesterday. But I get to do it. And when I get to do it, it takes away the angst. It takes away, it's more like an adventure, a challenge. And when you treat life as a challenge or an adventure, then it's more like I went to Adventureland in Disneyland. I remember that when I was a little kid. Wow. And you get excited and everything. It's magic. The adrenaline flows and we get to go with it. And we have all the energy in the world to handle the stresses of life, to handle what comes up next. Why? Because we look at this as a gift from God rather than something else. One of the worst things in my life was this hijacking, supposedly one of the worst. It was a magical experience. Why? Because I did something to create that because of what I had learned before. Now, people have learned some of the things that we've talked about. If they want to get in touch with us, they can on Facebook. And like you, I gift people that. If they want to read Winning Ways for Living, they could read Winning Ways for Living. It has all the different things that I teach. Or if they want, send me a note, say, how do you do the peacemaker meditation? Well, you lean forward and you have your hands out like as if there's a tray and you're holding the tray level. And as you're ready to breathe in, you breathe in peace in everything and bend forward, breathing out everything with peace. Peace in everything, everything with peace. Peace in everything, everything with peace. And the breathing calms down. We're doing a psychosomatic spiritual practice to get into that spiritual state of mind called peace. In everything and everything with peace. What can't we do when we come from that heart, when we come from that peace? So this is what's so beautiful. Look at what you do, Carla. You bring people together to give gifts to people. And this is what we're here for. If I don't if I don't urinate on my property, because I have some property, it doesn't feed the microbiome. The microbiome needs that. People don't know about that because they don't look at the ancient wisdom, the indigenous wisdom. There's a great book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerer. She's an indigenous lady that's a biologist. She brings back places in the world that are messed up by the big oil companies or the big battery companies. She does that through nature. She does that by fueling the microbiome, by planting particular kinds of plants to nourish it, and then to be able to have trees grow, and then to be able to have, and so on and so forth. But there's so much that we get to do to explore this creation. I'm so blessed to be with you guys. Thank you.
I just wanted, ooh, we have some, everyone needs to, remember, we need to close the mic or it gets very weird on StreamYard. I do want to say this conference is making me a little nervous because it's the first time, but I love doing it. And last night I was talking to a dear friend and I was seeing everything as like, leave me alone. And I wanted everyone to leave me alone, but I wanted to talk to this friend and I was saying, and this is happening and that's happening. And he said, well, why didn't you cancel the conference? And I said, no, I love it. I want to do it. I'm very excited about it. So it's really how we look at what's going on. I am vulnerable about it because I want it to be really, really good. And I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is that I'm getting great speakers and I'm filling it up with really terrific people. What happens if the internet goes down? You know, I can think of all the negative, but then I can also think of the positive. But being able to talk about it is what makes us vulnerable. It puts us in a spot where we are saying what is going on. And Kirk could have said, oh, I don't want to listen to that. That's a bunch of junk. Shut up, Carla. Or he could say, well, you're going through this. We'll get you through and you'll live through it. And it'll be over as if it's in a dream. In either way, I'm being vulnerable when I am talking about this. Because it is something that, you know, people look at it and, oh, that person's doing that. They're so strong and so capable. I'm not any more capable than the next person. I still put on my jeans one leg at a time. I still walk one step at a time like everyone else. And when we're vulnerable about what we do, that's what enriches that combination of bringing people together, of being able to speak. Because only if we are vulnerable do people come to you and talk to you, because they can handle it. You know, that person's going through the same thing as I am. Well, that's okay. I can go through it. I'll make it through. And who wants to respond?
I think you make a great point, Carla, about being vulnerable and being open, allowing yourself to be open to hear from other people. Because one of the points I want to make about vulnerability is it's often driven, I want to say the negative side of vulnerability is it's driven by the voices we have in our heads. Not the schizophrenic voices that people worry about, but we have these thought patterns and they come in, and some of them are very, very critical. In fact, hypercritical most of the time. And some of them are not. They can be more, you can do this, but they get muted because those hypercritical ones are the ones we tend to focus on. And when the hypercritical voices start up, you know, you put yourself out there and then all of a sudden you're going, what did I do? Why am I here? Oh my God, I can't do this. What made me think so? And to the outside world, you look like a great composed, confident person, but on the inside, you are a bowl of jelly. The point I want to make, though, is that outside view of you is coming to other people, and they see that confident person that you want to be. Inside, you need to remind yourself to pay attention to those more positive ones. You got this. You've worked your whole career to do this. This is a great opportunity you've given yourself. I am so proud of you. Things that a really supportive parent would say to you, you should have that voice turned up. And that takes the practice that Kurt was talking about in meditation. You practice, you practice, and you practice. I find when I start to feel really vulnerable, this is going to give away some stuff. I love my dad, and I miss him. He's been gone for 13 or 14 years. But there's a voice inside my head that I have now named Dad, because my father used to spur me on a lot of times, more challenging versus supportive. So he would say things, literally say things like, "Who do you think you are?" Or "You could do better," or "I think you're slacking." Now that was his way, believe it or not, of showing that he loved me, and as a child, I took it differently. So in my head, those are not actually very positive. So I hear a voice that goes, why do you think you can get up on stage and talk about this? What is it that you think? How can you stand in front of these executives and tell them how to do, communication? Why are you a media trainer? What is it that you know? And that could make me stop in my tracks. But there's another voice that I keep amplifying, and that's, you know what you're doing. You didn't take the easy road. You went over and over and over. You've made the mistakes, and you know how to do it. There's nobody in the world that has the experiences that you have. You've got so much to give. And that's what has to come through. For me, I do it a lot of times in my meditation because I have to turn it up. And that allows you to be vulnerable. It allows you to be authentic. It allows you to smile when you get up on stage because you earned it. We all have something to give. And as my good friend Cynthia Stott often says, there are people praying for you to come into their life. And if we keep letting that voice hold us back, and that voice is us, I might call it Dad, but it's me. It's my experiences that keep coming up. But it's kind of like in the cartoons, you had the devil on the left shoulder and the angel on the right shoulder. You need to turn up the angel, but that said, you need the negative side too, because that helps round you out. So when I did some work on the lightness and darkness of personality, and the point that I ended up pulling from all of that is when you draw a picture, you need to shadow it so that it comes off the page. So you can do a circle, but once you shade it, it becomes a sphere. So there's need for that kind of difficult voice. It's there to protect you. It's there to stop you from doing something that could be dangerous. It's a parental kind of voice. I recall when my son was little, I didn't like to yell at him, but I learned I had to, because I had to stop him and give him, safety boundaries. Well, that's what that voice really is. And when we can reframe that voice to being safety and keeping you straight and keeping you, moving forward. And then the other voice, the one that's the more positive one, pushing you to your highest being, then internally you can have some really interesting conversations, but it's understanding. So in the case of the conference, I can see how all the details could just overwhelm and befuddle you. And yet you see the vision of what it's going to mean to all the people who participate. And it's that vision that drives you no matter what. And that's what's exciting. It's that vision beyond this level of detail. I mean, I had a boss who always said the devil's in the detail. And then I kind of changed it over the years and say God is in the details, because it's just how you reframe it.
Totally. What a great expression. I was so blessed to be able to be a teacher at a ghetto school, at a middle school in Los Angeles. And I was invited to the Olympic Scientific Congress in Seoul, Korea. I was presenting on fitness for the 21st century. And my presentation was rated the best in the whole conference in sports psychology. And I was only a middle school teacher. All the others are academics. All the others are working in the field of sports psychology, just intimately with some of the tops and so on. I was working with other people in Southern California, some top people too, but I never let anything stop me because of my little saying that I always kept in my mind since I was like 12 years old: attempt and achieve. And I figured if I didn't achieve it, at least I gave it a go. So when I put in my application to be able to present at the conference, I gave it a go because I had made one. It was actually my first big one at the Olympic Scientific Congress was in 1984. It was called Meditation and the Ultimate Performance in Sports. And this was in the Los Angeles Olympic Scientific Congress. I mean, it wasn't in Los Angeles because they had to hold it elsewhere because of terrorism fears. The key factor is, like you said, Jeannie, always give it a go. Know that you can achieve more, that you aren't such a little flower. You can actually bloom even more. You're just starting your blossoming, and you may be 40 years old, or you may be 75 years old. I'm still blossoming. I'm still learning. We get to be able to keep on exploring. I think the reason people die a lot sooner is because they don't have any juice for life. They don't have any expression. They don't have any way to be able to see life as new. And when we explore life, like I do each day, I usually am attending something called Humanity Rising Global Solutions. And I see that, and I get inspired of all the different things that are happening around the world to make the world better. Not the crap that's happening that you see on TV. Not the stuff that denigrates others. Oh, you're left. Oh, you're right. Oh, you're male. Oh, you're female. Oh, you're this or that. The separation demon. There is no separation in life, as we know. Physics has proven that. When we look for whether it's a wave or a particle, well, guess what? It's actually consciousness. It's all one. If you look at it as a wave and look for it being a wave, it'll show up a wave. They've proven that, the double split theory and so on. But we've got an incredible life to lead, and it's helped by Carla and this simple little platform of discussion with people who have golden hearts that are serving humanity, that are enriching life, and everybody gets to enrich it, whether it's a small little flower or whether it's a big tree. Some people are big trees, others are just a little bit different. You're muted, Carla.
I needed to mute you before I unmuted me. No offense. Thank you for your kind words, Kurt. And it is true. This is going to be a phenomenal conference once I get through everything I need to go through. But in being vulnerable, it makes it easier to get people behind me and to work with me because they don't see me on a platform up high. I remember, and I just quickly want to tell the story before we go off air. I have a friend who is very well known, but I knew nothing about it when I first met him. So to me, he was just that person. And maybe 2 or 3 months after I met him, he sent me a little video telling me who he is. And I remember looking at it and I said, no, this person is just this person. And I never put him on a pedestal. And I had people who said to me, oh, you see him only on a pedestal. And I was like, no, I never saw that. And I'm so happy I never saw that, because I saw him as he is, as a friend, with good points and bad points. But we all have that. And when we begin to see that around the world, we can begin to accept the world for what the world is. And we can accept people for who they are. And we can have all those people come together and begin to work together instead of working against each other. Muslims, Jews, Christians, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're all one world in this together. And we all need to recognize that. At least that's my thought. I shouldn't say we all need, because there is no such thing as we all need. And with that, believe it or not, we came to another end of an hour of MindPlore. We will be back on Thursday. I know Jeannie will be with me. I'll surprise you about the rest. I know of a few, but it's still in planning stages. And with that, can we all wave goodbye? And I will press the end broadcast button. Bye, everyone.